All right, this is Melissa Urban, Chair of the Planning Commission. I am calling this meeting to order at 6:34. I am sorry for the delay. I had to make sure my kids were actually eating dinner before I left. So some days that takes longer than it should. Right now, if you can help us with roll call.
Okay. Chair Urban,
Present.
Commissioner Reynolds,
Here.
Commissioner Garrett,
Present.
Commissioner Kendall,
Here.
and Commissioner Etter is excused.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a quorum. All right, we this evening have a public hearing ZC -25-1, BestCare zone change. I am opening the public hearing and now I get to read a fund statement, so settle in. The hearing is now called to order. The hearing will proceed as follows. Staff will present the staff report. Applicant will present its application and supporting evidence. Any interested persons will then be provided the opportunity to present testimony or evidence in support, evidence that is neutral, or that is in opposition. Applicant, as the party bearing the burden of proof, will then be afforded an opportunity to present rebuttal testimony. Staff will provide closing statements. Any party may request that the written record remain open to respond to testimony presented at this hearing. At the conclusion of this hearing, the hearing's body may close the public hearing and deliberate towards a decision, close the public hearing and defer deliberations towards a decision at a date and time certain, or continue the public hearing at a date and time certain. All testimony, argument, and evidence must be directed to the applicable criteria or any other approval criteria you believe to be applicable. Matters unrelated to the application are not pertinent to the Planning Commission's decision in these proceedings. Failure on the part of any person to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the Planning Commission and parties to this proceeding an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the City Council and Land Use Boards of Appeal on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages from circuit court. Commissioners must disclose any ex parte conflicts, including site visits, biases, or conflicts of interest. Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature.
Okay. I do. My name's Commissioner Reynolds. I have tenants on behalf that their rent is paid by BestCare on their behalf to me, so there may be a conflict because I do receive direct payments from BestCare for their rent.
Are you an owner of the property that's being discussed?
No.
So it's an unrelated
It's
property?
it's unrelated regarding their zoning and everything. It's just, I do have financial ties to BestCare that.
As a tenant, but not in this particular.
As a property owner being paid by tenants that qualify through certain programs through BestCare, their rent is paid for by BestCare, so I'm just disclosing that.
Do you think that that meets the threshold for an economic conflict of interest or no?
It's that right now.
Hi, Craig Chen was standing in for Nick Steve, one of the contract consultants for the city. I don't think it does. I mean, there's not a direct kind of financial gain from that in any sort of way. If there was ownership of the property, I would say yes. But since there is kind of an indirect payment that's not coming through and associated with the request that's taking place for this housing facility, I don't think there's a conflict.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions or want to contest that?
No, it doesn't.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Clifford. We have way too many where you say, well, because you own property.
Yeah.
Okay, I do not have anything to disclose.
Neither do I.
Commissioner Kendall, I do not have any disclosures either. Wonderful, okay. Does any party wish to challenge any member of the hearings body based on ex parte contacts, biases, or conflicts? Anyone online? Okay, staff, you can now deliver your report. But first, can I please welcome our newest commissioner to this evening? Is this your first hearing?
This is my second.
Second one, I was not present at the previous one, so welcome. Thank you for attending.
Great, thank you, Chair. So we are looking at a zone change for BestCare's treatment facility. They are proposing changing their zoning from R1 to R2 for 4 tax lots. Here is that on the map here. This is brought up because they have also submitted a site plan request for a residential treatment facility here on the southern lot. That is shown here. Residential treatment facilities are not permitted in the R1 zone, so that's why they've requested an R2 zone change. And they've included all 4 tax lots in that request. They've also submitted a site plan review request for a cottage cluster development on the northern end of that site. They have 10 cottage clusters here. This was approved back in 2024. Both site plan reviews are administrative, so we are only looking at the zone change portion today as far as the hearing, but it's some context as to why we are here and looking at this. So this is an example of the cottage clusters that they're also putting on that lot there. As part of those zone changes, our public works director has imposed conditions of approval to the site to develop adjacent infrastructure. Here you can see the 4 parcels and the roads that surround it. They're going to need to bring Northwest Oak Street, Northwest 3rd Street, and Northwest Poplar Street into compliance with infrastructure standards. So those are currently gravel roads. They will be paving and placing sidewalks and landscaping. They're also extending public water and sewer to the site and then through the site for future developments. And they are dedicating right away. As part of this process, we sent notice to adjacent property owners, to affected agencies in our development team. We also published in the Madras Pioneer, and we received no comments from the public, no objections or any concerns. We took a look at our analysis. We looked at the 2023-2024 housing capacity analysis, which some of you might remember, we have an excess of R1 zoned land. So by changing this, these parcels to R2, we're not impeding on the developable land in that bank that we have. We also looked at Oregon planning rules 1 through 14 and comprehensive planning rules for the city, and we found it all to be in compliance. So we're asking today that you make a recommendation to the city council to approve the zone change. Craig, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. You covered it.
Okay. Any questions?
Do you have any questions for staff?
I do. Is that parcel of land right near where they're located now?
This is going to be north of the homeless shelter. So,
Here.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize that they owned land up there.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of behind Sonic
Yeah.
over there.
Is the adjacent parcels there, for the most part, don't seem to be developed.
Yeah.
Are they also R1?
Yeah, they are. Over to the east is commercial. Mhm.
That's the commercial.
See one?
Any other commissioner
Yeah,
questions?
I think so.
All right, do we have someone here for the applicant?
Hmm.
All right,
It's Zoom now.
Hi. I'm not sure if I can't see on Zoom if somebody else stood up because I know Brian was going to be there.
I think he's okay with you speaking first if you'd like to.
Okay, this is Lanny Hickey, and I'm with Rhine Cross Group in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Surveying in the engineering company, and I just want to thank you for your presentation. As you stated, it's pretty straightforward. We're just seeking a zone change from R1 to R2. And we encompassed all 4 of those tax lots because it just made sense. And per the recommendation of the city, it was determined that it would be better, even though we didn't need to include the tax lot in the top northeast corner. It just made more sense to include all 4 tax lots with the zoning request to R2. And like stated, the request from R1 to R2 was for the purpose of the residential treatment, which was not a permitted use in R1. However, it is a permitted use in R2. And as you stated, there will be improvements along the frontages, with the site design review that's going to come on the next planning commission meeting, I do believe. And oh gosh, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. And I do appreciate your presentation. And I'm pretty certain Brian's there. So if you have any questions about the future residential treatment facility, I mean, he's there and he can certainly answer those questions. But I think that's pretty much encompasses everything that we're trying to do right now. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Reynolds here. What other public services do you see in the future as needed to service the clients that you'll be housing here?
I'll defer that question to Brian.
Currently,
Brian?
it's
Brian?
Yeah, so we can record you on the mic.
Yeah.
Maybe it shouldn't be on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Currently, this is an expansion to an existing program. The one that exists currently is the 236 Southeast D Street, which is a 10-bed residential culturally specific SUD facility. And this will be a 16-bed, same culturally specific SUD facility. So no change there, just an addition of beds. And the crisis housing that's going to the north of that is just for, it's a new housing type that we're trying out. It's for severely mentally ill. That will be fully engaged in services through our South Y location. So that'll be a new service. And then as far as other ones, I can't speak to that.
So what services do you currently have in the 236 location that you foresee having need for at this new location?
So this one is just, we are seeing a need for capacity. And so this would just give us the opportunity to increase capacity for SUD inpatient services, congregate care.
Staff, what standard are the streets being built to or on this, do you know?
Yeah, it's a mixture of local and I forget what else.
That's it.
Yeah, local and
It's just local.
I think there's one more.
Is there
Yeah,
criteria maybe?
I can look that up.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Sorry. Do you have a bus stop at the 236 location?
Sorry, I'm not familiar enough with the name. It's if you bring it up on the map, it might show what it is. It's right across from the school and from the church.
So this is the expansion. Do you see that the 236 location may be phased out, or is it going to be continue to operate at
The
that
intent
location?
is to repurpose. Currently, the facility is male only, and so the intent is to convert the existing location to a female specific SUD.
What is culturally specific?
It's we do it for the Latino community,
Okay,
so it's primarily Spanish speaking with.
can you just say
staff.
one?
I don't know, that's just
Or Latinx?
this is how we write it.
I have a finding.
It's one culture, which is-
One, okay, got it.
Maybe, or is that?
I think it's local and
Yeah, just wait for staff to find out.
Do commissioners have other questions while they wait for the street info?
I do have a question, Commissioner Kendall. So the facility you have now, which is south of us, that's an outpatient?
No, it's congregate care, it's inpatient. They're typically 30 to 45 day stays.
The BestCare that's right here.
Oh, the one on the south Y, that's all outpatient services. This one is for inpatient.
Okay, so you have. You have an inpatient now that's not this outpatient one over there by Jake's. You have another one.
Yeah. Right on over there. Like 10.
Oh, no wonder.
Yeah.
It's in-
Because I work at Memphis Elementary.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one's inpatient, this one's outpatient,
No, this is inpatient,
the one down here.
the one we're proposing for
No,
this.
the one you're proposing is also inpatient.
Correct.
So that would be 3 then. The outpatient, the one inpatient, and now this one.
We have the we have 3 locations in Matters that are currently in operation. We have a engagement center that was recently opened at the old Bradley building.
Yeah, that's the one.
And that's just engagement. And then there's the Southside building, which houses 3 stories of all of our services that we provide. Outpatient services. And then we call the one on the 236 Southeast D Street PRN, and that's our congregate care for Latino services. It's all inpatient. And then this one's an expansion of that one. We're calling it PRM 2. And this will be a 16-bed congregate.
Also Florida.
All for BestCare there, but yeah,
But this one, the new one's gonna be Berkeley now.
the
But you
new,
said the other
no, the
one
new
was-
one is gonna be a male facility. The old one will get, once we finish building this one, will get repurposed as a female facility.
Local and minor collector? Is that correct, Craig?
Yeah, we have local street as an oak and then poplar as a minor collector.
Is that big enough for a bus stop? For like CETs to perform their duties and stuff? Just foresee a lot of
It's,
need for that.
it sounds like there's some needed right of way there, so they're doing a 3/4 kind of modified 3/4 street improvement until
Okay.
you get the adequate right of way, so. Maybe not at the moment, but there will be as additional dedication, future dedication comes in with redevelopment of the area.
Okay,
I believe there is a bus stop at the homeless shelter.
and there is,
Yeah.
okay, just as long as we have something
Mhm.
that is adequate for a bus stop. So buses get through there, because I just don't foresee a lot of people having driver's licenses and cars coming out of this.
For the new one, it'll be inpatient, so it'll be by appointment and people will make arrangements to go there, but for the cluster housing, yes, it would be very useful.
Do you decline a lot of, I guess right now it would be 100% of females, do you decline, is there a high?
We have other facilities in Redmond.
Okay.
That are fully gendered for everybody. This one, they were just trying it out as a pilot program, and it's been fairly successful, so.
Okay. Beds are full at the PRM one?
It fluctuates, but generally, yeah, we can keep the 10 beds full.
And that's just males, okay, so what do you think the percentage of the, I guess, leakage to Redmond of female Latinos that are seeking help?
Right now, we're not really keeping track of it. So
Okay.
but we feel that there's enough of a need for it, otherwise we would attempt it. And, we're planning to keep a bed available at any time for any pregnant females involved. Which we do currently for our in Redmond, but in service of all the BestCare, so we have transportation available. We take people all the way up to Klamath Falls if needed, so.
That was actually my question, Commissioner here. What percentage of your population will be servicing the Matters in Jefferson County?
I can't really speak to what it would be. Right now, they're grant funded and it's just for general Oregon use, but I think a lot of our referrals are just from our existing infrastructure. So if it's somebody who fits, who's from Redmond, we'll bring them to Madras, and if it's somebody in Madras, then obviously it's easy.
But it's only one culture.
Or this location,
Can you place a requirement saying that maybe 20% of the beds that need to be available for Madras residents or anything like that? So we're not like, you know, been in communities where they have somebody that the police pick up and they'll ship them to the next town. Because,
we do prioritize like closest first.
okay,
And we don't really have much data, but I don't know, just anecdotally from what I've noticed, it seems like it's all stays fairly local. We decided to put this location here because there was a higher population.
yeah,
And that's seemed to have kind of panned out. Our PRM program is kind of independent from our South Y location, which is only outpatient services. And we send our PRM team out to Redmond even to help the few people who are out there, but it's primarily based in Madras.
do you see a displacement in Redmond because of the influx of people from other cities? They are able to receive help.
I think it's just a growing population, so it's just hard to tell.
Okay.
Is the reason it's only one culture because of the grants and the state funding of it? Because that seems odd to me that if a person needs help, what difference does it make what culture they come from?
It was because there was a lack of Spanish, access to Spanish language, and I think it's it's hard for me to speak to how it started, but the lore that I picked up is basically it was something they wanted to try out. So they felt there was a major lack of services for anybody who was non-English speaking, specifically Spanish only speaking, and so they tried it out, and it seemed like there's been enough of a need for it that they've continued and grown it. And again, we offer services and translating services for other people who don't speak Spanish or any other race. This one, they wanted to try something else. So it's more than just Spanish language or Spanish culture, just to have the effort and best outcomes for somebody who is going through substance use issues.
That's a whole different avenue of who's making those decisions versus what you guys are here for. You're here for strictly the zoning, and it's your internal decisions that made it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, I'm assuming you guys are just asking to get more information on what BestCare is in general. This is just a congregate care facility, 16-bed SUV facility. I bring up culture specific because this one just happens to be, but at the nuts and bolts of it, it's just a congregate care 16-bed SUV facility. Code SIG and worse.
Does BestCare collaborate with the homeless shelter being your land is near there? Is there gonna be any crossover with that?
It's hard to say, probably for the crisis housing, there will be some collaboration. I just imagine there will, because there'll be overlap with populations. Our new burn center is probably the one that has the most engagement with it right now. They regularly have people going up there to try and get people engaged in services, and then they
In Burns? Did you say Burns?
Sorry, they call it burn. I can't.
Oh, Burns,
Yeah,
okay.
but it's an outreach program under the Measure 110.
Thank you.
Great, well, I appreciate that information, and yes, if you are here for a zone change, and sounds like BestCare has a model in place of what is appropriate care in different areas, and it is exciting that Madras may be able to expand services not only to people who live here, but people who live in the area. So, thank you. Do you have any further questions?
Brian, before you step away, can you state your name and association just for the record?
Yeah, no problem. It's Brian Cuomo. I'm the facilities director for BestCare treatment. Yep.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other questions?
I just want to clarify one thing that Commissioner Reynolds had a question about the bus stops. There's parking areas over there, so they will have the opportunity to utilize those parking areas for possible pickup and drop off. It's kind of out of the way of just passerby traffic and that sort of thing, so.
All right, do we have anyone here for testimony in support of this change? Anyone online? Do we have anyone who would like to provide neutral testimony? And do we have anyone who would like to present in opposition? All right, seeing none, we can move on. The staff that want to provide anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, the commission, we now have three options. We can deliberate. We can make a decision. We can think about it and set a date and time certain for a different meeting. We can also close the public hearing or leave it open. So I don't know what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that, we're recommending the city council the, BestCare zone change, yes. We recommend that they approve the BestCare zone change, CC, stated in CC 25-1.
Perfect. Can you also include in your motion to close the public hearing?
Oh,
We got that part.
and close the public hearing. Can we close the public hearing? In my motion.
All right, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Kendall, I'll second the motion.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful, motion passes. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you for attending, and if you're here just for that section of the meeting, you are welcome to stay, or this is also a good time for you to leave if you would like to. We are moving on to our next agenda item, which is actually pretty exciting, I think, is the Housing Action Plan update. And we're going to hear a presentation by Eco Northwest. So if you would like to say awesome, otherwise it is okay to sign off.
Thank you.
So whoever's presenting can go ahead.
We have Scott Goodman and Becky Hewitt with us today from Eco Northwest.
On Zoom, we're seeing a presenter view of your slides. Is that intentional?
No, thank you.
It works.
Full screen it. Oh. Do you know how to do that? I'm just trying to present without showing the presenter screen. Should I just zoom in? Maybe if I do this.
What, they just, oh, they can't get in and share, can they?
No. Does this work for you guys? It shows up as just the
If you're
single
seeing
screen
it.
cover.
Yeah, if you're seeing it correctly on your end, that's totally fine for us. I just wanted to make sure that you were able to see it correctly on your end.
Yeah, it's working. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I guess since I'm talking, I'll introduce myself. I'm Becky Hewitt. I'm a project director with Eco Northwest. And I'm gonna pass it to my colleague Scott Goodman to kick us off. And then I'll be back to talk through some of the other pieces at the end.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, all. My name is Scott Goodman, Eco Northwest. I've been working on this project for about a year right now. We presented to you all a little while back. So some of what you're going to see in the slideshow presentation is some review of what we talked about, and then some things that are updated on top of that with the revised actions that we have. This is my teacher. In my previous career, I was a teacher. So putting that hat on, I like to revisit some of the things so that we can make sure that those key points get hammered home, and adding the new content with it. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this is a history of where we're at with the Housing Action Plan, that it began from staff being directed to create this plan back in 2016. And then the HAP was approved just before 2019. the SDC reductions, the herd approval in that 2019 to 2020 area, and then in 2022, the major code updates. And we are in 2024, 2025 period of doing the update of it, but that herd and SDC reductions, we'll keep that in mind as we look at one of the upcoming slides that'll sort of put into context what's happened with housing production given those different components. So next slide, please. This is something we talked about previously as well, giving the city kudos for the work that has been done already of being recognized all throughout the state for the size that Madras is, making some progressive moves to take care of the major housing issues that everyone is facing, but Madras is getting noticed for being particularly proactive, removing zoning barriers, improving permitting processes, which that's one of the things that we hear all over the state, developers having issues with coordinating your infrastructure improvements to facilitate development, and then looking for how you can find funding sources. But the big things that get highlighted over here are the herd and the updates to the development code that happened in 2022. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that we'd prepared a little while back with the help of Nick Sneed, saying, hey, can we sort of visualize this together on a time scale, and then putting in when some of the housing action plan pieces took place. And I think it turns out to be a pretty powerful visual to see what's happening, where housing construction was pretty minimal up through 2018. And then as soon as the housing action plan gets passed and some of those levers that you have available at the city get pulled, then you can see how quickly the housing production picked up. Most notably there, the herd being in place so that in 2021, 2022, 2023, we see a pretty big jump in the production as well. But given some of the market conditions that have happened and need to readjust and reconfigure those tools that you have available for you, you can see there's that massive dip in 2024 and 2025 without nearly as much housing production. So that's some of the context for this housing action plan and where we are today. Next slide, please. So one of the big points about this is, why are we doing a housing action plan? We talked about this a bit before, and there's lots of different ways that you can look at this, but some of the ones that we added in here to look at have to do with, we all know that housing costs are rising very fast. What we want to do is make a point about how fast those are rising in comparison to income levels. So a lot of the data that we'll see in here, that it comes from the housing capacity analysis that was done previously in 2023. And that's what you saw, the previous agenda item was referencing some of that as well. But one of the ways of looking at that in 2000, the year 2000, the median value of a house was 3 times the median household income. Jump ahead 20 years, now it's 5.2 times the median income. So the amount that the median wage earner is making, the ability to afford a house is getting further and further and further away. One of the things that is part and parcel to that has to do with how high the home sale prices are. And so even if we take a snapshot of a smaller period in time, in 2022, median home sales price in Madras was $358,000. That's double the price it was just 4 years earlier in 2018. So that's looking at the home ownership side of things. There's also the issue with affording rents. So we'll look at some of the demographics that go along with this, but in general, Madras has lower incomes than the surrounding cities and in the county. So when you look at the average asking rent of $1,250, that's 59% of Madras households cannot afford that average asking rent. And so something that goes along with that has to do with high levels of cost burden as well. 40% of households in Madras experience housing cost burden, meaning they are paying 30% or more of their take-home income on housing. So that is a dire situation that is being felt all across the state, the region, the nation, but we're looking at this acutely in the case of Madras. So as we're doing this update, the housing market is an important thing to take into consideration, how interest rates, labor availability, how those things change over time. The housing market has changed. And as we'll see, some types of housing need less support now, and some types of housing need more. And one of the things that's unique about Madras has to do with it being a relatively small and cost-sensitive housing market. I'll talk a little bit more about that briefly in one of the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So as we are going through and we're doing this work to update the housing action plan, where are we getting our information from? What's informing that? What does the process look like? As I'd mentioned, we were looking at the 2023 housing capacity analysis, which gives you the 20-year forecast of housing need. We end up breaking that out into your 5-year projected need. We'll look at that later as well. We did some feasibility analysis of the financial incentives that Madras has been using for the last several years, and seeing how are those fitting with current market conditions. So how are interest rates affecting that, and labor availability and the cost of development. We looked through the development code to find out areas based on, as we'll see later, the interviews, which is a major part of this. What are folks saying were the impediments that they're facing in the development code and the permitting process? So I think one of the most important parts of this project is talking to the folks that are doing the development work in Madras itself. So talking to developers at the affordable level, market rate, and we also talked with folks doing manufactured housing. We talked with multifamily property management agencies, and we also talked with planner type of folks that are the civil engineers, development site planning professionals. And then, of course, during the process as well, we've been presenting this to City Council, Planning Commission, and then working with Madras's Community Development Department to inform all of this work as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we were going to talk about some of the key findings, market context. We talked about this when we last spoke about a month ago, so I will go through this quickly, and after I will pause to see if there are any questions that you might have about that. But we've broken this up looking at some of the different issues in Madras, such as the cost factors. Land is relatively cheap in Madras compared to some of the surrounding areas. So that means you can buy up a piece of property and develop it, but some of the issues that come along with that have to do with the cost of labor and materials that either are the same or higher than the region. Why is that? Madras doesn't necessarily, in the city itself, have all of the labor that you might need for plumbing, electrical, sheetrocking, roofing, all those different trades that largely are coming in from Bend and Redmond. So there's this travel time associated with it that increases the labor costs a bit, which makes development all that more difficult in Madras. Looking at the market affordability, when we were doing some of that financial analysis, we were seeing that these smaller housing units can be affordable to middle income households. The issue with that is that small housing units can be challenging to develop. You're trying to work on a much smaller profit margin than if you're building a larger house that's going to sell for a much higher cost, and you have a little more wiggle room with what you can do with your development costs. So it is difficult to make something fit in just the right size. There's also we're seeing the market preference in Madras. Why are folks in particularly looking at the Madras market when they're going to look to buy a home? The things that we heard people are most interested in have to do with elbow room, having space to put your stuff in, and the overall lower cost of living. One of the challenges that comes along with that is as you're trying to develop on a larger lot, maybe you've got this larger garage that goes with it, it adds a cost that is more difficult to recoup when you eventually sell that house. So imagine you're developing a small house on a 7,500 square foot lot, versus if you're doing that on a half-acre lot, the house is going to sell for more or less. It's going to cost the same price to build that house, but you're going to have to distribute that over a larger piece of land, which eats into the profit margin that developers need in order to get onto their next project. Next, we were looking at developer interests, and this is one where we can pass along kudos to the city, where what we heard developers saying was a lot of how much they appreciate the city's yes and attitude as they're going through trying to make different projects work, that they were getting support from the city in order to bring in the housing that's needed and work within the framework that they have. One of the issues that we found, though, larger developers, they don't necessarily have the market demand in order to come in and build high volume amounts of housing. And so there's certain sort of strategies that these larger developers have where they need to get a big old plot of land, subdivide, build a bunch of different houses, knowing that they can sell them in these large phases. And if Madras doesn't have that same demand to be able to sell those as they need to phase their development, then those larger developers are going to have a harder time coming into the Madras market. And then lastly, we were looking at income qualified housing, which Housing Works recently completed 23 units in Madras, which is worthy of applause. And we need all of the affordable housing that we can get, but it is extraordinarily difficult to make ends meet in the affordable housing world. There's lower rent limits in Madras. You've got your Jefferson County median income, and with Madras having slightly lower median income than what the county levels are, it's more difficult to make those rents meet. As I'd mentioned before, the higher construction costs, and then there's some difficulty with development scale as well. The way that a lot of the affordable housing, low-income housing tax credit system is set up, it tends to prefer these larger developments that tend to be in the 90 unit range, and something that's at this 23 unit range, which we see here with Housing Works. Those are a lot more difficult to make work out just because the tax system isn't set up as well in order to encourage that. So I will take a pause now before we look into the 5-year housing production goal to see if there's any questions or clarification that might be helpful.
Sure, I have a question, in that on this last slide, it talked about Housing Works recently completed 23 units, but on a previous slide, I mentioned that, production is only being 1 or 2 in the last 2 years. So are those just not updated for that, or is it because it was multifamily, it wasn't included in this housing unit production slide?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I can go back and look into that to make sure I don't give an answer that isn't adequate. But I believe it's got to do with when we got the data source for those permitted units that show 2 units in 2025. I think it's just based on when we got that data coming in, but I can confirm that.
It also, Scott, it might be in the 2020. There's like about the right number of units in 2023. So it's possible it's a little bit older. I'm not actually sure when that data, because it might be based on permit data.
Yep.
So it might be in the 2023 one instead, but in any case, we can double check to make sure those units are accounted for in that chart in some way.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners, so far? Everyone's shaking their head now, so we can keep going, thank you.
Okay, we'll keep going then. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is the 5-year housing production goal, and we break it out into 2 different ways of looking at it. There's the affordability level, and then next we'll look at the housing type. The total 5-year production goal is 280 units being produced. When we're looking at this by affordability level, we've broken it out so that you can see units that are affordable to residents that are at 80% or below of the area median income. This is where the largest need is. 179 units would be the 5-year production goal at that level, bumping up to the 80% to 120% of the area median income. It's looking at 40 units as the 5-year production goal. And then for that higher income group that's affordable at or greater than 120% of area median income, it's looking at about 61 units. And that's based on the current distribution of those income levels in Madras, that we've extrapolated that out to say, if this is your total unit production goal and this is where folks fall into their income brackets, that's where you would need your different affordability levels produced. And so those are also pulled from the 2023 housing capacity analysis. And the graphic there on the right sort of gives you an idea of what types of professions would be included in those different categories of income. Yep, next slide is good. So as I'd mentioned, this is us looking at by housing type, the 5-year unit production goal. And this is for single detached dwelling units, that's 154 units, which is going to include manufactured and cottage housing as well. When you are looking at the single dwelling attached, 20 units, and that's going to include the townhome and townhouses, row house type of housing. For plexes, duplex, triplex, quadplex, looking at 56 units as the 5-year production goal. And then for multifamily dwellings, a production goal of 50 units over the 5-year period. And so that's one side of it where there is the numerical number of the housing production goal. What Becky is going to talk a little bit about is some of the different ways of the housing action plan priorities, about things that might not necessarily get caught in just that pure unit production, and then also some of the different updates to the housing action plan as well that are being recommended.
Okay, thank you. So based on all that background information that Scott shared, in discussion with staff, we landed on a set of kind of priorities that the HAP would try to advance. So those include encouraging a mix of housing options, getting at that sort of range that Scott was just talking about, supporting development of additional manufactured housing communities specifically because that offers a way to address that imbalance between construction costs and bringing in labor from outside of Madras to be able to deliver lower cost housing. Supporting low and middle income households and attaining home ownership. That partly is good for the households and partly is good for housing supply because it helps developers of for sale housing be able to have buyers qualify for that housing. And then supporting maintenance of existing lower cost housing without displacing the existing residents, to make sure that as your housing stock ages, that it stays affordable but doesn't deteriorate. Go to the next slide. So for that first objective, excuse me, we have a number of different actions included that help support getting that mix, updating your master plan development housing mix requirements so that they provide a little bit more flexibility, but also a little more clarity on the number of units that are required to meet the housing mix. Updating the planned residential development zone R3 to provide more range of lot sizes that can be built so that it's easier to build both the small lot, lower cost options and balance that out with some larger lot options that might hit certain market segments better. Possibly rezoning areas that are more conducive to denser development to R2. There are some flatter areas that are currently zoned R1 and some less flat areas zoned R2. And so either initiating or supporting some zone changes to provide more areas that are flatter and easier to build that allow for higher density. Adjusting the incentives offered through the Housing Urban Renewal District and the SDC reductions so that they better align with where those subsidies are needed. There are some ongoing conversations at your council about that. Seeking out state grants and other funding that can support infrastructure development for affordable or other higher density housing. And then as a possible longer term option, considering property tax abatement, multiple unit property tax abatement that could help support and make higher intensity development more feasible. And then also considering in the longer term vertical housing development zone for the commercial zones around downtown where vertical mixed use development could both benefit downtown businesses and support the city's housing production goals. Go to the next slide. So to support the additional manufactured housing communities, there are some regulatory barriers that are, only some of them are due to city requirements, but potentially updating some of the requirements that you do have, such as garage requirements to provide more options about storage and parking that could reduce the cost of building manufactured housing or producing manufactured housing for Madras. And then the current system development charge reductions, or the ones that expired at the end of last year, it was unclear sort of how manufactured housing communities fit into those. And they're sort of have elements of multi-unit housing and elements of single unit detached housing. And so sort of clarifying how those fit into the SDC reduction scheme. Their impact is more like multi-unit housing, but because they don't all come online at once, allowing them to pay those fees as the units are installed would sort of phase out that cost over time. And then supporting manufactured housing developers as they might seek out financing from the state or other sources that could help make some of the units within manufactured housing communities into affordable rental housing. Okay, next slide. So to support low and moderate income households in attaining home ownership, on the regulatory side, as part of the updates to master plan development housing mix requirements, it's actually possible that you could allow developers to provide some community land trust units as an alternative to providing, say, townhouses, because those would also help expand the variety of housing options and price points available, which is really what that mix requirement is trying to get at. And so that is one way that that the city could support a community land trust in beginning to operate in Madras. The two that are highlighted here are ones that, because of the timing of this meeting compared to the city council meeting, these are ones that we've heard some feedback from your city council on that they had some concerns about. We had modified them previously, but we had heard that they may need to be further modified or potentially removed. So I guess take these two with a grain of salt, but possibly trying to support, basically use some staff time to help connect low and moderate income households to existing down payment assistance programs that are available at the state level, is what B is reflecting. And then again, mostly staff time, not a financial contribution, but potentially trying to encourage Rooted Homes or another community land trust to start operating in Madras. And that could just happen through the regulatory incentive that I mentioned in A. Next slide, thank you. So for this fourth objective of maintaining low-cost housing without displacing existing residents, the city might consider a maintenance code for rental housing that would get at sort of quality maintenance standards to make sure that the housing is staying habitable. Another one that we heard some feedback from council on was potential financial incentives for rehabilitation of existing units for low-income homeowners or low-cost market rate rentals. So there's a variety of different financial incentives that the city could use, but that's listed as a thing to sort of consider and explore further. And there's also questions the city's kind of capacity to implement those. So those do need further evaluation before they would be implemented. And then also C is basically partnering with area nonprofits, trying to, again, help households that live here in Madras access the funding and resources that are available from the state through nonprofit organizations, to try to make sure that people are aware of those and that folks who are eligible have the opportunity to access them. And then trying to identify funding to continue supporting Neighbor Impact's Energy Assistance Program. And then next up, we have just a recap of the ones that were identified as potential near-term actions. Some of them are regulatory. So the top two there are both regulatory ones that you could advance in the near term. But as I mentioned, there's some ongoing changes under consideration about the herd incentives and SDC reductions. And so some recommendations that sort of roll into that process as it moves forward. And then several that are really trying to sort of find ways to partner and bring resources to the community, bring outside resources into the community to support the city's goals. And next slide is we wanted to just, given that you all are the planning commission, we wanted to do a quick just spotlight on the various regulatory actions and sort of why they're important. I talked a little bit about the master plan development housing mix requirement already. And the lot size variety, those two kind of go together, basically trying to make it so that development, master plan development and development in the R3 zone, that there's just more different lot sizes, more different housing types and more different housing options that are incorporated into those, while also taking advantage of the where there is a little bit more demand for some larger lot housing to have a limited amount of that in balance with other housing options that can potentially help support overall feasibility of development. And the multifamily one we've talked about a little bit, trying to make sure just that you not only have sufficient amount of land zoned for multifamily and for higher intensity development, but that the land that is zoned that way is as easy to develop as possible, because higher density and multi-unit housing does have less ability to deal with challenging site conditions and infrastructure needs and those sorts of things. All right, so with that, I think we will take any questions that you have.
This is Commissioner Urban. I guess I have a question related to the rental housing maintenance code. Are there other towns nearby that recommend that? And what is the kind of minimum Oregon landlord law for that type of thing already in place?
Those are great questions. I was actually just doing some research on a little bit further research on this for actually another project, and there are a number of different Oregon jurisdictions that have components of this. It varies somewhat kind of what's included, but there are so we could follow up with some examples of that just from what we already know. I think that the action itself would be to kind of further that research, explore examples. I also know that there are some kind of cautions that you need to think about as if you're considering a maintenance and inspection kind of a program, to make sure that sort of at the extreme, if you are finding issues that are, the landlord is not responding to well, that you don't want it to become something where then people are losing their housing because the city is saying, well, it's not up to standard and so people can't live here. There are some really tough choices to make if you get to that point, but there are some resources that we compiled for a project at the state level, and we could at least share those resources with you if you are interested. But if you were to advance this action in the future, you would want to sort of pick up on that research and figure out what best aligns with the city's capacity, the type, the sort of scale of property management and number of properties that you have, and look into examples and see which examples would be the best fit for your community.
And I'll add on to that. So that's action 4A, and in the housing action plan, we've got at the end sort of an appendix that gives the details about each of those. And it talks about exactly what Becky was saying about, hey, engage your property managers, landlords, tenant advocates, community-based organizations to better understand the situation and find out how much is needed or not. So each of the actions has got a here's what the city role is, here's what the rationale is, and here's what the next steps would be.
Wonderful, thank you.
Commissioner Reynolds, I have an experience with a manufactured home that the tenant owned. I have space rent. They decided not to pay their space rent. They received funding to fix their roof, replace their windows. After a year of court, and this is a case study, this doesn't happen all the time. They received funding to replace their roof and replace their windows. Well, upon the final court agreement in which they were found that they would have to leave the unit. They decided to take a Bowie knife to the roof, slash it up, and bust out every window in there. So this is a one-off. This was the only one I've ever had to go to court for, and this was so. In my experience, it's 100% of the time when somebody gets funding to fix up their manufactured home, they 100% of the time destroy their manufactured home because they had no skin in the game. I heard, or it could have been spite, but that's 100% of the time for me. And I understand, and I've had other incidences where I've had rentals where they, whether it was in Strawberry Heights or the Pines, where we have worked with somebody through and they've received a subsidy and they have demolished the home. I would say that's probably 80%, 4 out of 5 of my experience of accepting this, and so 80% of the time with 100% is not good. It's a lot of work. My question really is, as we do this and we put in these incentives now, we're looking at the micro economy now, and we're trying to create affordability now. What in your experience has to, when that this works, and also in the future if it doesn't work, what do you have to do in the future to offset what you've done? Like the shortage in funding, because this funding is coming from other municipalities. We came off a special election where we have our community has decided not to seek funding to expand our library and our pool. We're taking money from other municipalities in order to offset housing. What, how far in the future do you see this burden of shorting these other municipalities where they see this negative effect, where they're no longer able to offer the services to the public that they need, because their funding has been cut short, because we're trying to create affordable housing? I mean, what do you see? I mean, what have you seen? What is your experience in this working?
I'm assuming that you're thinking about things like the HURD and potentially also the tax exemptions that were listed, the SDC reduction, some of those things that provide a financial incentive, but they involve foregone revenue for the city or other taxing districts. So I guess maybe before I continue, is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, especially with the SEC rebates and the incentives there, how far down the line do you see these incentives being taken, basically the negative impact? Or if there is any, do you see the negative impact of what it does to a community as far as other public services not being able to be offered?
So certainly anything that is going to involve foregone revenue to the city and or other taxing districts is something that you really need to sort of when the herd was implemented, there's a lot of financial analysis that goes into sort of determining what those impacts are going to be. Same if you were to do any of the tax exemptions, there's some analysis that goes into that in trying to understand how much foregone revenue are you talking about. So I would say it varies a little bit depending on what the specifics are. The SDCs in particular, you know, uh, I would say there's a variety of ways that cities approach some of the types of things that were in your SDC reductions before they lapsed. And some communities just update the way that they charge SDCs to say, scale them based on unit size, or to just have a higher rate for one type of housing and a lower rate for another type of housing based on the impact, the differences in impact between smaller housing units that tend to have smaller household sizes and larger housing units tend to have larger household sizes in general. Um, so sometimes you see things like that can get to a similar outcome as what the city was doing with the SDC reductions. But that's sort of balance out in their overall revenue impact. So that's just one example of a way that I've seen cities sort of mitigate that foregone revenue concern on the SDC side. On the property tax side, and this is similar for the herd, you're generally looking for applying those incentives in situations where, because of the incentive, you get taxable development that you would not otherwise have had, or that would not have been feasible for a long time. And so you are bringing the need for services online before you bring on the revenue. But the theory of all of those, and again, when they're implemented, you're generally trying to sort of do some math to check that this is actually the case. The theory of all of those is that they enable development that you wouldn't otherwise have. So you are the alternative, the sort of counterfactual, right? The thing that would happen if you didn't have that incentive in place isn't necessarily that you would get the same development, but you would get all the revenue. The counterfactual might be that you wouldn't get the development at all, or it wouldn't happen for a much longer period of time. And so I think those are the types of things that if the city were to, in the city is going through a process of deciding what to do with the herd incentives. And I know there's a lot of considerations about the impact to overlapping taxing districts there. If in the future the city were to consider some tax abatement programs on other places that are not overlapping with the herd or with the existing urban renewal districts, you would want to do some similar checks and make sure that on balance, what the incentive was going to, over the longer term, increase that tax base and increase that revenue further. Because certainly cities are under a lot of pressure already from measures 5 and 50 that really constrain growth in property tax revenue. And so that those fiscal impacts are really important to consider. So sometimes the incentive is a net benefit in the long term, but that you kind of got to make sure that that you have it set up in a way that really does deliver on that development that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm new at this, but what I'm seeing you say is these incentives to spur development that wouldn't be here, which results in tax revenue for the city. And in your beautiful graph here, I'm a science teacher at the high school, so I like graphs. And it shows that those incentives have spurred development. There's 415 units constructed after the TAP and herd. It's not actually what it's not, but when those were installed compared to 86 units prior to that. So I'm curious to know, again, new at this, but the herd, the MPD, the SBC, I wonder how much of that is actually the city's revenue, like, is that on a revenue stream?
SDC is a revenue stream.
Yeah.
The herd is an inverter. That's a herd district, so it's.
I could just see like 415 houses paying property taxes.
So, Ian, just to jump on that, sorry, Commissioner Reynolds again. In science. The correlation does not always mean causation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, so, and this housing unit production, sheet number 4. Why only back to 2009, is that all that, what, the data that was it? Slide number 4? Yeah, that one. Why only back to 2009, was there no information prior to that? I mean, 16 years is. I mean, usually 10, 20, 30-year increments when they do these graphs and my experience. Why stop at 2009? What was happening in 2003, 4, or even 5, 6, 7, and 8? Do you have any numbers for that?
I'll let Scott chime in here because he worked with staff on this. I'm assuming this is the data we have available. And this is all sort of post-Great Recession data. The housing dynamics in Central Oregon were real different in the Great Recession and the bubble leading up to the Great Recession. I can
That's
sort
right.
of imagine what the shape of the graph might look like there, but Scott, I'm guessing we don't have data available on this from staff, correct?
That's exactly right. We have back to 2009, which is what we're showing. And that can be a request to Nick and to see if we can get data further back from that. Might have to do with how the data was acquired, might not be available before that. I don't know.
Because I just wrote down like 6 subdivisions from 2003 to 2008 with Sunnyside, Canyon View, Strawberry Heights, The Pines, Yarrow, and I think it's Morning Crest. That all those were built during that time. Those were, done without the incentives in place. And also mistakes were made that they learned from that, in the future, as far as code. Now we understand when we put in these types of housing, sidewalks, lighted sidewalks, certain widths of sidewalks, street size, those are all very important. That's more of the aspect of what I think needs to be emphasized than rather, how to incentivize building, because we really don't know how to incentivize building. We know that, when people move to a certain area, that usually incentivizes building. There is going to be a constraint there that causes some friction as far as housing prices going up and supply going down. But, what we hope to see is that friction causes people to start building. That friction causes, the supply to hopefully there's a demand side on the builder side where, okay, we can get in here and we can start building homes, and as supply increases, the prices tend to level out. And I just think that the information provided is going to be in the picture that, look, we put the herd, the HAP in place, and look what happened. Well, I don't know if that is the incentive that people use to build, because some of these housing developments, like Willowbrook, that subdivision was approved back in like 2006. And there was frustration with the city and the builder. These are, if you look at each individual subdivision and build out, project by project, you'll find that it wasn't due to, now there's an incentive, it was due to, maybe there was a personal reason, there were issues in place where, people didn't feel that, building a spec home in Yarrow was going to pencil out because that is a high priced home that you have to build there. And the amount of turnover that they had in the HOA made it pretty ridiculous to go through their architectural review committee to get approval to build a home there. But these are, you know, these are the one-offs, looking at the pure micro view of it. Of what caused, you know, this pent up, I guess, demand for supply, because there was a demand, or there were builders that were willing to build, but for some reason or another, they ran into these roadblocks that were 15 years down the line, you know, figured out through different staff or different different policy that may be, or because, you know, prices fluctuated the way they did and they went up, and it made the project there viable. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate, saying, hey, when we start incentivizing certain things, we cannot directly, you know, say that because we did, that is the reason this happened. No, we need to look at it on each individual basis as far as, and I'm not saying every single home, but yeah, majority of these homes, why were they at this time financially viable to build? And then the sudden drop off. I mean, if you were to say that happened to herd passing is the reason that this occurred, well, then now we have one house and three houses being built in the last 2 years or so far getting permitted. Would that not be also because of the happen to herd? I mean, we have maxed out the number of people that are positively incentivized by the I guess what's in place means that they're incentivized to build these homes. Now that demand for building is depleted now, and we artificially, you know, spurred it on, and now we're facing the repercussions of doing so. Now we have 1 and 2. There is no demand to build in Madras because we have artificially stimulated it to a point where they don't want to build anymore.
Commissioner Reynolds, I think that it's valid to consider, you know, a longer term horizon here. But I think too, to come into consideration that there are market forces at work here, and that drop off in 24-25 may relate more strongly to interest rate changes than anything. And I think you're right, you can't say that the half of the herd spurred that additional growth per se. But we do know that the markets prior to 2009 had different incentives, being interest rates, or builders were allowed to build spec homes because loan terms were more generous. So I think that if we go back in time, we'll discover that there were incentives for different types of buildings at that time as well. And that the true problem in all of the US is that we have a housing supply issue. And I think that by this group coming together, they're not saying that we have to provide tax incentives or that we have to lower SDCC fees. Instead, this is saying that those are options that could be available. And we would rely on the city and the assessor and the people who do the finances of the city to determine if that is feasible or not feasible given the project. I don't think that at this time we're being asked to consider the specificity of those incentives. I feel rather that this report is saying, hey, there is a problem of supply, not only in Central Oregon, but across the US. And these are levers that may help address supply problems. And these incentives are trying to get at the market issues of building right now, that their interest rates are high. The cost of building in the Northwest is very high. So it is difficult to build an affordable home here. And while I agree that the free market should be working, it is not, and it has not been working in the US for a long time. So I guess I see this as more of a way to help the city address housing shortages without saying you must build 5 houses with tax incentive X and Y. This is more of a, look at the market. What builders are coming here? What lots do we have available? What specific project would meet these terms? It's not saying they have to do any of these things. It's more, let's consider what we could offer that may spur development.
Thank you, Chair. And I do understand that, and I do understand, yeah, there's something wrong where people can't afford a home. The main point I think I'm trying to get across is by putting these incentives in place today, in the future, what are we gonna have to do to offset the repercussions of having these in place? Because there is going to be a negative repercussion from taking money from certain municipalities in order to incentivize this. And who knows what those repercussions are. So by having these incentives here now today, who knows what has to be done 5 years from now to offset the damage, but the impact that these incentives have today in the future as far as funding for other municipalities, funding, that's what my concern is that these are not, we cannot look in the future, and know what has to be done to offset. What we can do though is, look, we are here to set standards. We are here to, hopefully make a fair playing field and allow have the right allocations of, R1, R2, so that people can develop or builders can develop in order to fit the housing need for Madras. Again, it's gonna come down to what's profitable to the builder, but there are agencies out there that, do build specific types of homes or specific types of housing to fit migrant farm workers, to fit indigenous people, to fit those types of housing needs that, maybe those are what we can do instead of kind of cutting off other municipalities from the funding that they need in order to perform their duties.
But I do think it's important to see that there were multiple options for incentives and not just tax incentives. There was also a lot of partnering with different agencies that would not necessarily be taking money from a municipality. I think also when you talk about repercussions, there may be negative, but there may also be immense positive ones where we are adding to tax revenue streams in the long run. That we do have more streets that have sidewalks because we have new developers coming in, adding to the sewer system, adding to connecting to roads that are there right now. So yes, there may be negatives, but there may also be positives too. So, I think in a way, that is up for the city and the city council to apply to the specific projects as they come up. And two, that as these projects come up, honestly, we get to look at them. We get to look at the specific projects that need to be approved, whether it's zoning change or site development plan. And at that time, those incentives will most likely be discussed as well. So I don't think that this is prescriptive that everything is going to have an incentive, that it has to be an X percentage. This is just saying, hey, let's recognize that there is like a bag of tools that we have at our discretion that may enable more housing and different types of housing to come to Madras.
I have. Can I jump in? Commissioner Kendall. Stepping aside from that which you eloquently described, the community land trust into the master plan. That, my question to the city is, do we not have that, something like that in the master plan now? Okay. And so, partnering with community land trust, what does that entail? And putting that in place as another possible tool or option, is that something worth looking into, doing some research, having a meeting over to see if that could be something that could also help the city with that?
Yeah, that is something that we are willing to look into. We did have a presentation by Rooted Homes at one of our city council meetings. They are a community land trust. So that is something that we're willing to look into.
So it's not in the master plan, but it is something that we could put out there to review.
I mean,
And would that be a good thing according to this amazing work that Eco Northwest did? They put it in here as this could be a very viable option. Do we want to put time, energy, and effort into adding that to the possible master?
yeah, I think in line with what they're speaking about, with the different options you have for development types, cottage housing, whatever it may be, you know, multi-duplex, and a cottage formation. Those are, I mean, really, those are the tools that a you know, community land trust needs in order to develop and make sense for them to create a model where they can then sell units off at an affordable price and then hold that property, you know, lease it to those property owners. So if you provide those tools, then you allow community land trust to come in and do what they do best, which is to build that out.
Okay, well, we've done a lot of work with the different types of housing and different things like that, and a lot of that is in place. So is that sufficient, or do we need to look at even a bigger picture that would include the community land trust and how that fits?
I mean, I would say the housing types, styles, development patterns are changing pretty rapidly, especially in Oregon, because we're adapting to kind of what the new rules are that are coming out of the legislature, that sort of thing. Middle housing, different options that we have. But I would say, you know, the structure of where Madras sits, absolutely, you layered into the code what needs to be there in order for the development styles and variety of development styles to take place for CLTs, different kinds of developers, affordable housing developers, all of that. So I don't think it's lacking, but there is some things that they've identified on there that I think you could probably refine or maybe add to.
That may be something that then we could look at in the future as a possibility for another tool in the toolbox.
Commissioner Reynolds, and just to clarify, it wasn't where these other options to build, these other affordable options are taken off the table. It's just the incentive to builders, you know, financially, where, you know, where's that money coming from? You know, once you can't just make the money up here. It's taken from another, you know, source. So having these other options is great. These other options, you know, cottage clusters, all of, you know, building up and incentivizing people to, or builders to do that. That's not what I'm against. I'm for that. It's just we've got a limited pot, and trying to take, you know, from that pot means somebody's going without, or something's going without. And I understand building up a property base in order to tax is actually, you know, greater than, you know, what is currently here, but at the same time, you can't build up the base and expect like I mean, our public services to cover more with the same amount of money. It's not fair to them.
Where does the money for HAP and PERD come from? Eco Northwest. Is that a state monies? Cause I know where the tax, we know where that incentive comes from, but where does HEP and HERD come from? Where's that pool of money? Is that state funds? Is that? Where is that?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so the HAP itself, the preparation of this plan was funded by a state grant. The HERD is an urban renewal district specific to providing incentives for housing development. So what the HERD is doing is taking the tax increment from the development and sort of paying it towards those incentives. So the funding for the HERD comes from the increment that the development creates. And the funding for anything else that you might implement as a result of, deciding to move forward with one of the actions that's identified here, you would have to, some of them there are some tax exemptions that you could consider, but those are,
I know where the tax exemption, so I wasn't including that. I was trying to address that, yes, there's a pool of monies. Where does this pool exist? Is it local? Is it, county wise, or is it state wise? And what you were talking about, the HERD, it came across a little confusing. Like it was a big circle. So if it's not something that takes from, do these two programs not take from other needed resources to try to bring incentives? Or
so,
is robbing Peter to
oh,
pay?
sorry.
Your concern, that just a robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, I don't think it's my concern, I think that's what it is that they're taking from other municipalities in order to set up this line item on our property tax statement. To to incentivize building.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think that there's some misunderstandings about how the HERD is funded, in that last statement. However, I think that, what our options are for this evening is that we can, close. This isn't a public hearing, so either we can choose to ask more questions, we can choose to, make a recommendation that we approve or not approve, or we can postpone and come back to this at a later time.
Chair, sorry if I could, there is a grant deadline associated with this housing action plan that, unfortunately, Nick is unavailable to speak to all of the specific implications of not taking action this evening, but the grant deadline is the end of May. So we're trying to make sure that we allow the city to get the plan completed and adopted within that timeline, if you're going to choose to adopt it. And I, unfortunately, Nick would have to speak to the specifics of exactly what the implications would be of not completing it within that grant deadline. But I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that there is an end of May grant deadline involved, and I'm not able to speak to where there might be flexibility to postpone adoption or not. But certainly the city's ability to get reimbursed for any additional consultant work ends May 31st, and I don't know beyond that whether there's flexibility.
So the HAP, the Housing Action Plan, is a plan. It is not a fee that is charged to anybody. It is not collected in tax revenues. The Housing Action Plan was able to be updated because they received a grant from the state to do the work, if that makes sense. So it wasn't an additional charge. Now the HERD is a different story there, and I think what Becky was getting at is that the HERD is funded by new revenues, so new development within the area that are part of the housing urban renewal district. So let's say that generates 1% of new property tax revenues, the HERD say maybe takes 5% of that new 1% as a way to fund further development. So it's not taking existing money, it's taking new funds that are generated through the renewal district. Does that make sense? And I think one thing just to think about too is that there were SDC incentives in the last previous years. And what is good about those types of things is that they do sunset. They're not here forever. And so even if the city was to say, we want this type of housing price, we've done the analysis, we're going to incentivize X, there has to be a sunset date. It's not something that's there forever. And it could be project by project as well. So similar to the SDC fee charge reductions, those have sunsetted. So, you know, the city and the county for that matter have opportunities to change their mind, to end the funding. It's not a subsidy that happens forever. Yeah, exactly.
So Commissioner Reynolds has the SDC rebate sunsetted. Staff, sorry.
Yeah.
Question staff.
We're no longer offering that, yeah.
Okay, and it's no longer project by project, somebody can apply and get it, it's gone,
It's gone.
it's gone, okay, and how long did that last?
I think that started in 2020. Does that sound right, Nico? Becky, do you have data on that?
I guess I don't know if it existed before the HERD or not. I'm actually not entirely sure about that. Scott, do you know?
Yeah, based on our timeline that Nick helped us put together, I've got the SDCs reduced for new housing in mid 2019 and HERD approved right at the beginning of 2020.
It's done, no exemption, nothing.
So at this point, we can move to approve the plan. We can move to not approve the plan. We can move to wait until Nick gets back to answer more questions. Those are all options. Yes, and what that means is that the consultants will no longer able to provide answers for us. So it's up to you. I feel like I talked too much this evening, so I do not want to make a motion.
Yeah, I don't know that, you know, as far as a motion goes, there's no formal approval, probably more informational than anything for you guys, and obviously a recommendation and kind of feedback that you have gets taken into consideration as it moves on to the council level.
Yeah. You don't actually have to approve.
I don't
We'll
believe,
make a motion to approve that.
I don't believe it's on the approval level. It's on the agenda, but it was more kind of informational. And obviously it's an opportunity for you guys to ask questions if there's information that needs to come back. But generally, if you're looking at it and you're saying, hey, I see what we have here. It's providing us information relevant to housing and it's supplying options that we can see could go forward, and then the policymakers at the top, at the council level, could say maybe they'd send it back down to explore some options, which you would if there was code changes and that sort of thing. But it allows them to like chew on that and figure what do they want, what do they see for vision for the city. Obviously, hearing this, I mean, you know, it's great comments that if you have stuff that need to come back out, because then it gives them kind of information that they could explore based on what you guys have raised. But I don't think there's a formal action necessarily that needs to take place.
That's great, and I do think that, as Commissioner Reynolds has spoken of this evening, that there definitely would be sensitivity in this community to any type of incentive that is given, as evidenced by last night's election. So I do think that while these incentives to me look wonderful, I do think that that every deal needs to be transparent and it needs to be clear if there is a reduction in fee or some type of monetary incentive, that it is clearly laid out in the development proposal that it relates to.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other items from staff?
Our next meeting is gonna be on June 4th. We don't have anything currently on the agenda, but it would be a good time to do some training that Nick will provide, so hopefully that all works out.
That sounds wonderful. All right. Is there any objection to ending the meeting? All right, then our meeting ends at 8:50. Thank you.